2026 prospect Sam Funches is working on rescheduling a visit to Spokane. Why the four-star center could end up committing to Gonzaga after all.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, in our live edition here of the Locked On Zags podcast Tuesday afternoon, Ryan Nembhard outshot everybody on the first day of the NBA Draft Combine. What that means for his draftability, we'll get to that to close out the show. We're also going to discuss a potential transfer target from Florida State in Christian Nitu. We'll talk about him in the second segment, but we are leading off today's show with more recruiting news in the 2026 class. We already know Gonzaga is pursuing and working on setting up a visit with the number one overall ranked prospect in the 2026 class. That's small forward Tyran Stokes. But now Gonzaga's first known target in the 2026 class is back as an option for Mark Few and the Zags. Sam Funches, for those of you who are closely tracking Gonzaga's recruiting, you may recognize this name. Funches was a target for Gonzaga last year. They made him an offer. He's actually, as of this recording, the only 2026 prospect Gonzaga has made an offer to. I suspect they will make an offer to Stokes very soon, but right now Sam Funches is their only offer in the 2026 class, and he was scheduled to visit Gonzaga back in February of this year, had it all scheduled out. We knew the date. I think it was, I'm actually not sure which game it was. I don't think it was going to be the Santa Clara game, but that would have been not so great if it was, as a pretty poor performance for the Zags. But regardless, Funches didn't end up taking that visit at all. And at the time, it kind of felt like maybe Gonzaga was out of the running for the big man. He's from Mississippi. We knew Ole Miss was putting in a huge effort to land him. And now it sounds like he's back on the back available and potentially going to end up at Gonzaga. He, like we said, he had that visit planned, but a recent article from On3, Jamie Shaw of On3, spoke with Funches and had some great quotes from the 2026 center prospect. Here's a direct quote about his pursuit from Gonzaga. He says, quote, "Coach RJ Barsh is the coach who offered me. I don't talk with them a lot. He mainly talks with my dad. I can't wait to see what it's like over there. It's in Washington, and I hear it's really nice." So it does sound like Funches is planning to come to Spokane after all. It's obviously a good sign for Gonzaga after their initial pursuit. Seemed like it's stalled out. I think the general consensus was if you schedule a visit and then cancel the visit when you've already taken visits to other places, it probably means that you're not going to end up at Spokane or in Spokane at Gonzaga. I still wouldn't be putting a bunch of chips into this basket here. I wouldn't be making the assumption that this means, oh, Gonzaga's now a front runner or anything like that, but they're not out of the mix. They're not out of the equation. For just to give a little bit of update on who Funches is, for those of you who maybe haven't been following this recruiting story as closely as everybody else, 6'11" center, 205 pounds, from Madison, Mississippi. He's a four-star prospect. He's the second-ranked center and the 28th ranked overall prospect in the 2026 class, according to On3's individual rankings. He's a little bit lower in the composite rankings. 247 Sports has him 41st in the class. I think they have him as the third-ranked center. But he's a four-star prospect in that 25 to 40 range in the recruiting class, top 50, I think, consensus-wise in the class overall. Really, really talented player, a tremendous shot blocker and scorer around the rim. He has 23 total offers, according to 247 Sports. He's already taken an official visit to Kansas. Bill Self and the Jayhawks in the mix here to bring him to the Big 12 in Lawrence, Kansas. Ole Miss, of course, has been in on him for a very long time, very understandably. He is the best player in the state of Mississippi. at On3 at 247. I believe everywhere has him as the top ranked player in the state. So typically the big state schools try to keep those kids in-house, and Chris Beard and Ole Miss no doubt would love to have him on campus. Not only has he visited Ole Miss in Kansas, he also has taken a visit to Cal. Mark Madsen and the Golden Bears often ending up on these lists as they work very hard in their high school recruiting. And so those are the 3 visits he's taken. He has plans to take a visit to Gonzaga, as we laid out earlier. He also has plans to visit Mississippi State. No surprise there that the 2 big state schools who are interconference rivals in the SEC are also competing here to land the best player in the state. He also has plans to visit Vanderbilt and LSU. So lots of staying in the home country area, staying in the SEC, which is very understandable. They got a lot of money in the SEC. And if you're from the area, it makes sense to play close to home, play close to family, and get a pretty hefty paycheck while playing in an incredibly competitive conference. But again, doesn't mean Gonzaga is out of the running by any stretch. In fact, the fact that Funches wants to come out to Washington, wants to see campus, wants to see the facilities, wants to see, the West Coast, or at least much closer to the West Coast in Spokane, I think is a promising sign for Gonzaga that they might be able to really woo him with a big pitch and the beauty of the state of Washington. And of course, more than anything else, ideally they'll need to be able to afford to land Sam Funches. That's going to be a huge question, of course. But the development of bigs at Gonzaga is such a great selling point for Mark Few and the staff to be able to say, look what we do with bigs who come into this program. Look at what we do with players like Drew Timme, or international guys like Filip Petrusev or Killian Tilly or Domantas Sabonis, or guys like Braden Huff. And for Funches, a guy who's already a more highly regarded prospect than Drew Timme was, than Braden Huff was, than a lot of those guys were. Like, if we can turn those guys into NBA players or to all WCC players, or in Timmy's case, All-Americans, like, think what we can do for you. And I think for Gonzaga, the fit is very obvious because Funches is a very, very good rim protector. And so many of the bigs that Gonzaga brings in don't really contribute in that space. I think that's been an issue for Gonzaga the last couple of years, really in the post-Chet Holmgren era. They just haven't had a lot of rim protection. And really, even before Chet Holmgren, they've had a few good rim protectors periodically, Brandon Clark being a very notable example. Of course, Chet and Austin Day before that. But even some of their other good bigs, Shannon Karnowski was a good low post defender, but wasn't a rim protector. Zach Collins was, but he's only here for 1 year. Like, they haven't had a lot of, Filip Petrusev wasn't, Drew Timme wasn't. Like, there's just not a lot of great rim protection that's come through Gonzaga in the last couple of years. Graham Ike and Braden Huff, that's not what they do, and it's not what they're going to do next year. And frankly, this upcoming season's rim protection is going to be very dependent on how many minutes per game you can get from Ismaila Diani, because they don't have a ton of rim protection on the roster. Funches is that. In high school, he averaged 6 blocks a game this past season, 17 points, 11 boards, 6 blocks. He was playing at Germantown High School. Again, he wasn't playing out in a prolific prep or Compass Prep or a school like that. So the numbers are always going to be a little bit inflated, but still a high upside big. He's long, he's skinny. Again, 6'11", 205 is what he's listed at right now. So he's got to put some weight on him, but he's a great rebounder. He's got a good motor. He's a natural shot blocker. And for Gonzaga, if you can get him into your system, your high usage system, where you're feeding him the ball down low, where you're letting him go to work offensively, he's got good touch around the rim, and he can also contribute defensively. He's got the versatility to potentially switch out onto smaller players because he's got a lot of athleticism. He moves well laterally, and he can protect the rim and alter shots and force guards to settle for mid-range shots or just be unable to score around the rim. That's a huge advantage for Gonzaga, and he could be a huge two-way player for this program if he were to come out to Spokane and play for the Zags. Been a lot of talk about Gonzaga's recruiting as of late. In the transfer portal era, we have seen Gonzaga tend to prioritize bringing in more veteran players from the portal as opposed to spending big money that they may not have on bringing in high school recruits. And it's been tough. I know for the fan base, I know many of you have been, had their hearts set on Nick Kamenia from California, who ended up going to Duke, or Isaiah Harwell from Idaho who ended up going to Houston, or Kingston Flemings, who also went to Houston. Before that, it was Asa Newell, who went to Georgia, and Zoom Diallo, who went to Washington. Like, been a couple of years of Gonzaga missing out on some high-profile prospects. And this 2025 class so far is just Davis Fogel, who, no disrespect to Davis, he's a very good player, top 35 player in the 2025 class, according to 247 Sports. He's a good, talented player that Gonzaga is bringing in, but the names that they had on their list all got crossed off, and they didn't end up landing any of the big names before Davis committed. Now they get Parker Jefferson joining that class as well. But I think it's worth a reminder that Gonzaga hasn't built their success primarily on the back of elite five-star talent. They've built it on the back of developing talent, which they continue to do even in the transfer portal era. It's harder to do now. And I know people will point to Dusty Stromer leaving or Hunter Salas leaving as like, oh, well, they're not able to do it as well. Yeah, but like Braden Huff's still here. You know, Graham Ike is about to be here for a third year. Ben Gregg spent 4 or 5 years here. Nolan Hickman spent 4 years here. Like, they're still doing it. And they bring in players like Diani and Jefferson with the intention of them doing it as well. And going after players like Stokes and Funches, maybe they don't land them, maybe they do, but they're still pursuing high-level talent. You know, again, Funches, I was going to say 5-star talent. Funches is not a 5-star, but he's one of the best centers in this entire class. So obviously a player that Gonzaga has their eyes on, who has a lot of pedigree, has a lot of upside, and would be really just a tremendous fit for what Mark Few and the Zags like to do. So I think that the fact that Gonzaga is still very aggressively pursuing the kind of talent they want out of the high school recruiting ranks doesn't make me concerned that they've just punted high school recruiting altogether. They clearly have not done that. And even if it means there's going to be some more swings and misses, I'd rather them be doing that than not taking swings at all. And I think Funches is the kind of player where, yeah, many of us wrote him off 4 months ago when he didn't take his visit to Gonzaga, but the staff didn't write him off. RJ Barr's still been out there communicating with his family, and now it sounds like they might be able to get him back on campus, or get him on campus, which they weren't able to do earlier. That's why you don't give up, and that's why you keep pursuing. And if Gonzaga is able to make this work, oh boy, they're getting themselves a really talented, really high upside player to join this front court in 2026. Speaking of Gonzaga's front court, speaking of high upside players, there's a Canadian power forward who Gonzaga pursued out of high school, who is now available in the transfer portal after showing some glimpses, and I mean glimpses, of excellence during his time at Florida State. We're going to talk more about him coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. So whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on all the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live during the game. With player props, performance trends, and their same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you're looking ahead for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs, you're thinking, hey, this is going to be the year. Maybe they'll make a move, get Desmond Clyde, Tyon Grant Foster, something like that, and you're ready to roll with what this team could win in 2026. They're at plus 4,000 odds to win the national championship in 2026. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up right now. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're moving away from our conversation about Sam Funches, one of the top ranked prospects, one of the top centers in the 2026 class, who is now resetting a visit up to Spokane after canceling his visit back in February, to talk about a transfer portal target. That's been typically what we've been talking about here on Locked On Zags. And while the market has died down a little bit, Gonzaga is still in pursuit of two of the most notable players available in the portal right now, Desmond Clyde from USC and Tyon Grant Foster from Grand Canyon. In fact, the plan for this show before the Funches news was to kind of do a debate, the case for Grant Foster, the case for Claude. We may do that on Wednesday's show, depending on if any other news breaks. But the Zags are also going to make a move in the front court, almost certainly. I think the big priority is adding some more talent to the backcourt, especially if they can get some outside shooting. That would be great, but they need a power forward. And I think you look at Gonzaga's roster right now, you see Graham Ike, Braden Huff, they're going to start. You see Ismaila Diani and Parker Jefferson, and you think, well, that's 4 bigs. maybe they don't need a ton there, but all those guys are kind of traditionally centers. And I think finding somebody who's more of a traditional power forward is a good fit for Gonzaga. And they don't necessarily need somebody who's going to play a bunch of minutes right away. So a younger upside power forward who could kind of grow into that role feels like a really nice fit if they can find it. And they can. Just so happen to find a name that makes a ton of sense for Gonzaga. It's a player that the staff has already pursued out of high school. They have a connection with him. They've spoken with him. They've recruited him. This would be Christian Nitu. He's a 6'11" forward from Toronto, Canada. Yes, the fact that he is Canadian is a factor here. As we know, Gonzaga has pursued Canadians with extreme regularity. Multiple members of Team Canada's Olympic team last year were Gonzaga alumni. That's not uncommon for this team. Nitu was in the 2024 class. He played at Fort Erie International Academy in Toronto. He also played with Team Canada in the U17 World Cup, which is, I believe, where he first caught Gonzaga's attention. He also played in the Basketball Without Borders Global Camp while in high school. All that led to him being a fairly well-regarded prospect, not elite by any means, but On3 had him as the 39th ranked power forward in the 2024 class. He was the 25th ranked player coming out of Canada in that class as well. He actually initially committed to Indiana State under coach Josh Schertz, but Josh Schertz in the offseason last year took the head coaching job at St. Louis. That caused Nitu to decide to decommit and reopen his commitment, where he then landed at Florida State with coach Leonard Hamilton in the ACC. And Nitu didn't get many opportunities at Florida State. But I think part of that is just the fact that Florida State always plays these like 10, 11-man rotations where everybody plays like 20 to 25 minutes, and you don't get a ton of guys playing like 35 minutes per game, and you have a lot of hockey-style substitutions. This was under Leonard Hamilton. He has since retired, so I don't know if Florida State will continue to look the same way. In fact, they likely will not. But it contributed to Nitu not getting a ton of run for this Florida State team, despite showing some upside as a true freshman on this roster last year. All told, Nitu played 22 games, played about 7 minutes per game, averaged a little less than 2 points, about 1.5 rebounds per game. He shot about 48.5% on 2-pointers, just 18 of 37. Again, we're talking about very small sample sizes here for Nitu. 6 of 12 from the free throw line, 0 of 7 from 3. So we didn't see the outside shooting at all. We didn't see enough from him from the free throw line to really gain much of anything. Or really offensively at all, quite honestly, from Nitu. Just in that small amount of playing time, it's hard to learn a whole lot about his game. But he saved the best for last. His last game in a Florida State uniform, he had 8 points on 4 of 4 shooting, alongside 3 rebounds and a steal. That was in 18 minutes against Virginia. He also had 6 points, 2 boards, and an assist in a game against Tulane, where he played 15 minutes. So we saw some glimpses from him in the few games where he got to play double-digit minutes. He looked pretty good in those games. He entered the portal way back in March, just a couple days after the portal opened. I think it was the 28th officially when his name was known to be entered into the transfer portal. But despite being in the portal for 6 weeks or so now, there hasn't been a ton of attention around his name. The one name we have seen connected to Christian Nitu in the portal is Washington. Coach Danny Sprinkle actually flew out to Tallahassee to watch Nitu during a workout. So that was a pretty big move to make for a coach if you're not going to really make an offer or recruit the player. But that happened like 4 weeks ago. And he has not landed at UW. He has not been known to have a list or anything like that. So I don't know if there was a lack of interest after the visit or if it's still something that they're just working out the details on. But I suspect that Nitu could draw more high major interest as the kind of transfer portal continues to thin out, as teams start to look for, hey, we're no longer trying to fill a starting lineup. We're trying to fill some depth options. We're trying to fill some younger developmental roles on the roster. And maybe that's when Nitu becomes more of a priority for some of those teams. I saw, again, a player who played 7 minutes per game at Florida State, who had some pedigree coming out of high school. He's probably going to draw some high major interest. Again, I don't think that your Kansas, Kentucky Dukes are going to come calling necessarily, but teams like UW or even, maybe some Big East schools or some lower level programs, or even if it's not high major, like A-10 schools or American Athletic Conference schools, I think could come calling as well. I think the Canadian connection makes Pacific a school to keep an eye on, although I don't know how high of a priority a program in the cellar of the WCC will be for Nitu. I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see Coach Dave Smart trying to bring him in, as they have continually prioritized Canadian prospects from Dave Smart's background as a longtime college coach in Canada. Again, Gonzaga recruited Nitu out of high school. They were connected to him. They reached out to him. They contacted him. I don't know the full breadth of those conversations necessarily, but I do know that there was some contact between the two sides. Nitu also had offers out of high school from Arizona State, Creighton, Illinois, Mississippi State, Pitt, Santa Clara, TCU, and UNLV, among a handful of others. So some of those programs have undergone coaching changes, may not still have that same level of interest, but worth keeping an eye on for sure. With a list of programs like that, there's definitely going to be some more interest in him once kind of, I think some of these other roster moves die down a little bit. And in terms of his fit at Gonzaga, it's pretty obvious. He's a 6'11" big. He handles the ball well. You watch the video, you watch the tape on him. You look at the numbers, and you're going to see 2 points a game for a Florida State team that was pretty bad last year. That doesn't excite me at all. And I get that. That's a very reasonable take. But watch the tape. Watch the highlights. Watch full game video clips that you can find. Nitu moves incredibly fluidly for a 6'10", 6'11" big man. He handles the basketball like a guard. Many of his possessions last year, you watched the tape, block shots off the backboard. He had multiple tip dunks off missed rebounds. His athleticism is very good for a player of his size. And I think that you can watch the tape and you can see the upside. You can see the potential. You can see where somebody like him could really thrive, especially in a more spaced out offense like Gonzaga's. And I think you also watch him and you can see he's a power forward. And I think the question is the outside shooting, because to play the 4 in Gonzaga's offense, you need to at least be respected with your outside shot. You know, we saw that with Ben Gregg last year, where teams, if they don't respect your shot, they're going to try to sag way off of you, and that's going to make it much more difficult to get the ball to Graham Ike or Braden Huff down on the block if the big can just give you 8 to 10 feet of space and dare you to shoot that open shot. Now, Ben Gregg made San Francisco pay when that happened. If Nitu can't do that, it really undermines his ability to be effective in Gonzaga's offense. But he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. And I'm not going to write off his outside shooting because he went 0 of 7 in 1 year at Florida State. That just seems very silly to project that there's no outside. And again, there may not be. And if Gonzaga determines, hey, we don't think he can play this role capably, then they won't make an offer. Or if they bring him in and they realize it's not going to work, then he spends 1 year on the bench and looks elsewhere after that. Like to me, I think this is a low risk, medium reward situation. I don't think that this is like a high reward, like he's going to blossom into a superstar necessarily, but there's very little risk here. Bring him in, let him play a small role as a sophomore, let him develop, let him learn the system. And if he kind of shows that he has the skills to play the power forward in this role, maybe he steps into a bigger role after this when Graham Ike is gone. You know, and then maybe a couple years down the line, him and Diani form a really strong front court with Jefferson in the mix as well. Like, those are very possible things that could happen with Nitu based on the skill set that he has, based on what Gonzaga has done with bigs who have his skill set in the past. I think there's a lot that makes sense here. Again, Gonzaga's priority right now is not the backup power forward position. Their priority is getting one of the high profile guards like Claude or Grant Foster into Spokane. Then they'll turn their attention to some of the other things to shore up the roster. But last year, one of their, hey, we're just shoring up the roster moves was Emmanuel Innocente, and that turned out great. So this can really work if Gonzaga finds the right pieces. I think Nitu, by all accounts, seems like the right fit for Gonzaga at the position of need that they have. And considering the connection the staff already has, this makes a ton of sense to me. And he's going to be a player that I'm watching very closely over the next couple of weeks out of the transfer portal. Well, folks, we're closing out the show talking about Ryan Nembhard, who beat everybody at a 3-point shooting drill at the NBA Draft Combine. Could that land him in the second round of the draft? There's at least one prominent media outlet that thinks so. We're going to talk about that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Because between dining out, online shopping, and just your general entertainment costs, it's pretty easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. And for us and our family, it's really important that my wife and I are on the same page when it comes to our finances. And thankfully with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is easier than ever before. You can track both your shared and personal accounts, set your goals together, and stay on the same page without all the extra stress and hassle. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, folks. Segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And we're closing out the show talking about the NBA Draft Combine, which, as we're recording this live on Tuesday afternoon, about 3:25 p.m., is still going on. Of course, the Combine is going to go on throughout the rest of the week. So the data that we have right now is going to continue to change. But I want to talk about the early data that we have on Ryan Nembhard's performance in the shooting drills and some of the agility testing at the NBA Draft Combine, while also talking about the fact that we have seen a handful of mock drafts come out in lieu of the NBA Draft Lottery having happened on Monday night. We now have seen most of the major media outlets, Bleacher Report, The Athletic, ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, etc., have released at least first-round mock drafts. Some of them have released full two-round mock drafts. Now that we have the lottery out of the way, we know that somehow, inexplicably, the Dallas Mavericks, after trading Luka Doncic, now have the first pick and the rights to Cooper Flagg, which is just the thing that is happening in the NBA. I won't get into all the speculation that many people are having online right now about this, but hey, it is the luck of the draw, I suppose, for the Mavericks. San Antonio gets the second pick and likely will take Dylan Harper if there's not a trade that goes on there. But with the Combine now having happened, we've seen a handful of mock drafts, and most of them do not have Ryan Nembhard getting drafted. He hasn't been expected to be drafted throughout this process. If you read mock drafts during the season, Nembhard was almost never cropping up on them. But we did have one. Sam Vecini of The Athletic posted his mock draft shortly after the lottery was revealed on Monday, and he had Ryan Nembhard going 57th overall out of 59 picks to the Orlando Magic, where he would compete for a roster spot to join a team that has Jalen Suggs, of course, from Gonzaga, who was teammates with Ryan's older brother, Andrew, when they were both at Gonzaga together. So it would be very fun to see Ryan get a chance to make this Orlando roster and potentially play alongside Jalen. Would be, I'm sure, cool for Jalen to get a chance to play with both brothers. For Ryan, playing in Orlando near Montverde Academy, where he went to high school, might be kind of cool too. But I suspect that while I collected 6 or 7 mock drafts and Nembhard was only on one of them, I think that that's going to start to change. I think we're going to start to see his name start cropping up more and more on various mock drafts, especially after his shooting performance at the Draft Combine. For starters, just getting invited to the Combine. He started out at the G League Elite Camp. 5 players out of the 45 who were at the G League Elite Camp turned that into an invitation to the actual Draft Combine. Nembhard was one of those 5. Mackenzie Mbako was one of them. Niederhauser from Penn State was another one. There was an Australian big who was in that group. And then I think Tamar Bates from Missouri was the other one. So you're in rarefied air, and players who do well enough at the G League Elite Camp to get invited to the Combine tend to boost their draft stock and start to get a lot of attention, because that's a difficult thing to do. And it also really helps when you shoot the absolute crap out of the basketball when you get to the Combine. And that's what Ryan Nembhard's done. This was posted about 20 minutes before I went live per Jonathan Givony of Draft Express and ESPN. He combined everybody's shooting in all of the drills and got their overall shooting percentage in every drill combined. Ryan Nembhard shot 60% in all the drills combined. That places him tied for 3rd among all the players who participated in the shooting drills. Mark Sears from Alabama was first, who shot a blistering hot 69% in those shooting drills. Chaz Lanier from Tennessee, one of the best shooters in college basketball last year, he shot 63%. And then Nembhard was tied with Memphis guard and All-American PJ Haggerty, who shot 60%. Both of them were 60%. That means that Nembhard was ahead of Cedric Howard from Washington State, Walter Clayton, Kobe Brea from Kentucky, Trey Johnson, considered the best shooter in this class, Cooper Flagg. Like everybody else who participated in the shooting drills was a worse shooter combined collectively than Ryan Nembhard was. And the shooting drills are taken seriously, especially if you kind of buck the trend. But if you're a good shooter who shoots well in the shooting drills, it doesn't really help your stock all that much. If you're a bad shooter who shoots bad in the shooting drills, it doesn't help, but it also doesn't hurt dramatically. For Nembhard, though, the shooting was a question. Nembhard shot 40% from 3 last year, which is great, and was clearly looked like a capable in-game three-point shooter last year. But in the 3 previous seasons of college basketball, 2 at Creighton, 1 at Gonzaga, he didn't look like a great three-point shooter. So it was very reasonable, especially when you consider that he's already limited significantly by his height and his age, which are not things that he can control. He cannot get taller. He cannot get younger, but he can buck the trend of being considered a weak three-point shooter. Because at that point, what Nembhard had was, hey, I'm a great passer. I have great floor vision, basketball IQ. I find my teammates in positions to score. I can facilitate and manage a game better than anybody. But if that was all he had going for him at 6 foot with, decent athletic testing, which we talk about in a second, that's not going to get you drafted. But hey, also I can shoot 40% from 3, and I'm going to prove that my shooting is legitimate through the actual scrimmages as well as during the drills. That's going to start to turn some heads. And I think that's a huge thing. Nobody's doubting that Nembhard's going to be able to impact the basket. Like when the scrimmages come around, Nembhard's going to make a bunch of great passes. He's going to rack up a bunch of assists. He's not going to turn the ball over. That's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, that's significantly problematic, but I'd be surprised. It's going to happen. Nobody's really surprised by that. But if he does that while going 2 of 3 from 3, while hitting open threes, while making good decisions in terms of when to shoot and knocking down the shots he needs to knock down, that's going to help him a ton. And I think that's the most important thing that he can do successfully for the rest of the combine. I mean, shooting well in the drill is going to help, but shooting well in the scrimmages, that is, I think, the single most important thing that Nembhard can do between now and June to get him drafted when the NBA draft rolls around on June 25th is the first round. I'm not going to get picked in the first round, but June 26th is the second round. If he wants to get picked that day, continue the streak, bump the streak to 5 straight years of Gonzaga having at least one player selected in the NBA draft, he needs to shoot well in these upcoming scrimmage games, because the athletic testing was kind of a mixed bag. 20 players did the lane agility drill. Nembhard finished 16th out of 20. 15 players did the shuttle run. Nembhard finished 4th. That's very good. That's a promising sign for him. 20 players did the 3-quarter sprint. Nembhard finished 9th. Fine. Nembhard did not jump very well. Not that that's a huge part of his game. 16th out of 20 in the standing vertical leap, 16th out of 20 in the max vertical leap. So there was concern a little bit about some of the athleticism. Again, I don't think it was like shocking or unexpected necessarily, but again, a 6-foot guard without like otherworldly athleticism is going to need to be able to prove that they can impact the game, because the defense is not going to be great for Nembhard at the NBA level. It's not. There's no way. He's just limited by his size, in the sense that even if he works tremendously hard, there's just only so much that he can do. But if he can impact the game offensively, not just as a passer, but as a shooter, that's really going to help him as well. So we talked about how Nembhard was only in one of the mock drafts that we looked at, going 57th to Orlando in Sam Vecini's mock draft. I did want to just highlight a few of the other Gonzaga adjacent players that were on these mock drafts that are at the combine. That'd be Hunter Salas, who of course played at Gonzaga, then played at Wake Forest. Alex Tui was committed to Gonzaga before deciding to play in Australia. And then Cedric Coward, who is at Washington State last year in the first 6 games of the season before getting hurt, but is now committed to Duke in the transfer portal. Coward's the one I'm most interested in, because you can tell the scouts either think he's going to be a first-round pick and he's going to stay in the draft, or he's going to go play at Duke, because he was 22nd to Atlanta, 22nd to Atlanta in 2 of the drafts, 23rd to Indiana, 35th to Philadelphia, and then undrafted in 2 of the other ones. Nobody's got him mocked in like the mid-second round or anything like that. He's either going in the first round, early second round, or he's not showing up on the mock draft at all, because at that point, people think he's going to return to Duke. Hunter Salas was actually undrafted in 3 of the 6 mocks as well, kind of continues to build the thought that he probably should have stayed in the draft last year, as opposed to returning to Wake Forest, where his 3-point percentage plummeted after a great first season with the Demon Deacons. He did show up 56th to Memphis in Vecini's draft, 1 spot ahead of Nembhard, 46th to Orlando, and then 51st to the Clippers in Sports Illustrated's draft. And then Alex Tui was very consistently in the late first or mid-second, 43rd to Utah, 37th to Detroit, in ESPN's draft, 40th to Washington, 52nd to Phoenix at No Ceilings, 30th to the Clippers at Sports Illustrated, and 27th to Brooklyn in my guy Brian Kalbrowski's mock draft at For the Win. So be interested to see where these guys ends up in the mock draft. Obviously, most important or most of interest to the folks listening to the show is going to be Ryan Nembhard, and hopefully he can help continue that streak of Gonzaga players being selected in the NBA draft. We'll have a lot more about Ryan Nembhard and the NBA draft process. We'll have more transfer portal targets. We'll have more recruiting updates going forward this week here on Locked On Zags, but that is going to wrap it up for me today here on the show. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, once again, continuing to keep you up to date on all of the happenings with Gonzaga basketball. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and as always, go Zags.